Whaia, whaia, whaia te tika, whaia te pono, whaia te aroha, mo te oranga tangata, kia puta ki te whaiao, ki te ao marama, homie, huie, tae ki e. Awesome. So I know you're all here today to hear more about some recent changes to occupational noise-induced hearing loss processes at ACC. We've obviously got a pretty packed agenda here. We've also got Karen from NZAS and Ben from AudioAccess to excitedly launch their new web-based calculator. So I'll hand to Karen to introduce herself.
Thank you, Cody. Kia ora tātou, ko Karen Toku Ingoa, President of the New Zealand Audiological Society. I'm really pleased to welcome everyone here today on behalf of the NZAS to today's seminar with ACC. The NZAS has been really pleased to be working very collaboratively with ACC over the last particularly 6 months, and we're really pleased to see a strong interest on improving the process for claimants, which result in better hearing outcomes for ACC claimants, particularly as you'll be well aware of the changes in the last 6 months with being able to lodge and start claims as well. So we're really pleased to be able to share the information today around the new changes being launched. In our conversations with ACC, we are always well aware in talking about the importance of documentation and it being at a really high standard, which of course is one of our best practice, is part of our best practice guidelines as clinicians. And this really helps speed up the process for the claimants, but also get the best possible outcomes for our claimants as well. So I take this opportunity to remind you and encourage you of the importance of this. So once again, thank you for joining today's webinar. We're really excited to be here and co-hosting this, and I'll hand over to Ben.
Yeah, so hello everybody, my name's Ben DeFerris. Some of you will see me as maybe a familiar face. I've worked alongside ACC and some of the ACC resources in the past, particularly around the PLH calculator, one of the important documents we have in terms of the ACC process. So I've been doing that since 2019, but today is special for me and exciting. It's a chance for me to introduce the free new and upgraded tool that we've got called the Notch Report. That'll be web-based and free to access for all, and that it'll be actually tailored to the new process that ACC are excitedly launching today. So I'll hand to Barb.
Thanks, Ben. Kia ora, Barb Chittick. I'm a health business analyst with ACC. I've been working in the detail in the occupational noise-induced hearing loss space for the past, well, at least 6 months. This year's flying by, so it was most of last year as well. I'm excited to finally be able to discuss with you all today how we've made some improvements to allow patients. I may jump between patients and clients, FYI, throughout this presentation, but allow patients quicker access to hearing aids to improve their quality of life. So I'll go into a bit more detail once Cody's gone through the housekeeping. Back to you, Cody.
Awesome. Thank you all, and thank you all for being here. As Karen said, we've been working quite collaboratively with the group that you see here today, and we just want to take the opportunity to thank them also for working so closely with us. Before we get started, a few housekeeping points for us all. So this meeting will be recorded in case you do want to watch it back to share with others who are interested but couldn't make it today. A link to download the webinar will be sent out after today's session. Please keep your cameras off and microphones on mute. It just helps the Zoom platform remain stable and reduces background noise and other distractions while we present. Please, if you have any questions throughout the webinar, put them in the chat function by directing them to the ACC person with questions in their display name. So I believe that is Melissa Taylor and Ben Pennicott. Hopefully most of your questions will be answered in the presentation, but there will be some time towards the end of the webinar where we'll answer some of the general themes from the questions coming through on the chat. We'll also collate a full set of your questions and answers and circulate them as soon as we can after today's webinar. And now I'd like to hand over to Barb to kick us off with our presentation. Thanks, Barb.
Thanks, Cody. If we just go to the next slide, please. Brilliant, thank you. Thank you. It looks like we've got a fantastic turnout on the Zoom meeting today. So really appreciate you all taking the time to go through this exciting change that we've made. So I just wanted to start with us taking everyone back on the journey. We're probably started around about 2021 And ACC took a deep dive into the occupational noise-induced hearing loss claims process. I'd just like to acknowledge Anne Greville, who's finished working with ACC, but she did a lot of the heavy lifting back during that time. And during that process, we identified that there was a long time frame of over 100 days for clients receiving a cover decision. So that is from the start of the process where the claim is lodged right through to a cover decision. So over 100 days, that's very extreme. So we identified the delays during this process was due to multiple steps, some which was added little to no value, but ultimately resulted in clients waiting a significant time to be able to access hearing aids. As a result of this, we identified if audiologists were enabled to submit these claims, then would be able to remove the need for a GP visit, saving time for our extremely busy and under pressure GPs, but as well as saving money for our client not having to pay for that GP appointment. So that, in our eyes, was a win-win. This also saved approximately 10 to 15 days in this part of the client journey. We also enable clients to complete and submit the ACC 724, which is a client questionnaire, and the client can submit that directly to ACC or via the audiologist. This helped reduce delays in the end-to-end process, where ACC was no longer required to contact a client to complete at least a 30-minute conversation over the phone. We all know how tricky it is to get a hold of people these days. So as a result of that, in June 2022, this all went live with the aim to achieve faster cover decisions for clients, faster access to hearing aids, reduce cost and time to clients and GPs. And for audiologists, we hoped that this has resulted in ongoing relationships with those clients as there are quicker turnaround timeframes for those needing to access hearing aids. We can report that within 3 weeks of this new process, 89% of audiologists had registered to lodge ACC 45 claims. And to date, we have 95% of all occupational noise-induced hearing loss claims being lodged by audiologists. So I just want to take the time to acknowledge that and say huge thank you for your amazing commitment and work in that space. It really was a big change to your day-to-day processes. So ACC really, really appreciates that. Next slide, please. Perfect. So the first stage really laid great foundations for us to continue to build our collaboration with you all. The second stage to the piece of work that we've completed is with regards to the client journey. Obviously, the audiologist now been able to lodge claims and clients been able to submit the ACC 724 faster. ACC identified that part of the reason that the hearing loss clients were continuing to experience delays was caused by ENT availability. So up until December last year, ACC was sending 95% of occupational noise-induced hearing claims through to an ENT for further assessment. The other 5% wasn't sent due to total hearing loss being less than 5% or incomplete documentation. Also, ACC identified 45% of those claims were coming back from an ENT declined. So ACC completed a deep dive into claim audits and identified some familiar trends which indicated a portion of the claims did not require an ENT assessment and could be approved or declined based on a client's work history and the occupational noise-induced hearing loss minus age calculation alone. Just to clarify, this calculation is the high frequencies component, 3,000 to 8,000 minus the age. As an audiologist, you have been using the PHL calculation spreadsheet that has the 2 to 8 high frequencies minus age frequencies. You might be wondering why we've gone with the 3 to 8 instead of the 2 to 8. As we were developing the triage criteria, we researched that what the high frequency range was used for in the occupational noise-induced hearing loss component. We noted that the majority of ENT reports that we analysed showed the common ENT practice within New Zealand was to use the 3,000 to 8,000 hertz range minus age to calculate the occupational noise-induced hearing loss. ENTs commonly reference Cole's research that states occupational noise-induced hearing loss normally causes a symmetrical bilateral high-tone sensory neural hearing loss. Bit of a mouthful. Maximal at 3,000 to 4,000 hertz, with some recovery at 6,000 to 8,000 hertz. With increasing age, there may be a loss at the 6,000 to 8,000 hertz notch, but this is replaced by a 3,000 hertz bulge. So throughout this stage, we have had regular engagement with ENTs to better understand this, and they also understood why ACC was implementing an internal triage criteria. I had one ENT in particular who started the conversation with, "I can't understand why ACC sends every single claim through to an ENT. In some cases, nothing has changed since the previous claim had been declined." Another ENT raised a specific concern where an age-related hearing loss could override the noise-induced hearing loss if the audiogram was completed sometime after the client had retired. ACC acknowledged this and agreed that there were some rare situations that may occur. So to accommodate this, we have included a consideration criteria relating to the client's age and whether there was any previous audiograms completed. We have also ensured with our ACC cover assessors, if they have any uncertainty whatsoever, their default position is to send these claims for an ENT assessment. So as ACC was developing the internal triage criteria, we had input from ENTs, audiologists. I'd just like to make special thanks to Helen and Karen from NZAS, as well as Ben and Brad from AudioAccess, as well as our cover assessments teams. The intent of the triage process is to provide clients that don't require further assessment a faster cover decision, enabling them to access hearing assistance earlier, or if it was a decline, seek alternative funding arrangements. Throughout the trial, we note that the patients acknowledged that this was a great outcome because they could make their next steps a lot faster than having to wait for an ENT assessment. The triage criteria have three key areas to determine if a cover decision can be made without further assessment. They are total hearing loss and the occupational noise-induced hearing loss minus the age calculation, work history, and the risk factors, so whether there's any recreational exposure or medical history outlined. So on the screen there, you can see we trialled this from December last year through until the end of February this year. The trial successfully confirmed that claims with no risk factors present were appropriate to have a cover decision made without an ENT assessment. The trial resulted in a similar cover decision outcome for the client when comparing claims that went through the trial and those that did not. The cover decision timeliness also reduced by 17 days, which we anticipate will continue to reduce as the longer term claims are processed. So now for a client processing through the pathway, the turnaround timeframes have reduced on average by 25 to 30 days from when an ACC 45 occupational noise-induced hearing loss claim is lodged to cover decision. Another positive outcome of the stage shows that with the processes being improved, this has allowed increased cover assessor capacity, which helps with other tasks being processed in the client journey, like re-aiding. ACC will continue to review the triage criteria process with new reporting developed to monitor ongoing cover decisions. I'd just like to note that there's been no changes has been made to the cover decision outcome process. In this next slide, we wanted to show how we all play an important part in the client's journey. On the left-hand side of the screen, you can see the audiologist's role in blue and the ACC role in orange. By making improvements throughout the end-to-end process, we can provide faster cover decisions. So here, I just wanted to touch on some key aspects, reminders in your role as an audiologist and how important it is. So the completion of the ACC 612. I'd just like to remind everyone that there was a new version released in April last year with some key improvements, especially around obtaining the client email and phone number. We also require accurate and complete documentation, so client details, making sure that's all correct, ensuring the grid lines are visible in an audiometric graph report. Our cover assessors always check these results, and if those lines aren't visible, it makes it really, really hard, and also results in ACC having to then contact the audiologist to potentially complete a new test. Also making sure that the mandatory frequencies, so the 500 to 8,000 range, is all tested with correct gender and age for that client. Also informing the client of the importance of filling in and submitting the ACC 724 quickly and correctly with the full information, as well as providing a copy of any previous hearing tests or assessments. So in the orange, you'll see the ACC role. So as you know, we are now triaging all claims that come into ACC. We obviously look at that 3,000 to 8,000 noise-induced hearing loss minus the age calculation, and Ben will obviously speak to this in more detail shortly. Currently, cover assessors at ACC have a calculator developed by AudioAccess, who input the 500 to 8,000 frequencies that you provide in your audiometric report and check those results. And the calculator that the cover assessors use then uses magic to pull through the 3,000 to 8,000 hertz into a percentage. The cover assessors then look at the client questionnaire, the ACC 724, for the work history, making sure that there's at least 10 to 15 years in New Zealand. If there's any risk factors present, i.e. medical history or significant recreational noise exposure, also they'll locate any previous audiograms that have been completed for that client and consider any exceptional circumstances as previously acknowledged. And there is some rare situations where the age-related hearing loss overrides the noise-induced hearing loss. From there, we can determine if a cover decision can be made without further assessment. And just a reminder here, as mentioned before, if the ACC cover assessors have any uncertainty, their default position is to send these through for an ENT assessment. Next slide, please. Perfect, thank you. So just to finish up before handing over to Cody for some more questions. Like anything, the better the information coming into ACC, the faster we can process it. And as a result for our clients, they will receive a faster cover decision. So we obviously need your help to achieve this. So what we need from you, as I mentioned, having accurate and complete documentation helps with making those quicker decisions and stops the toing and froing between ACC, audiologists and patients. Cody will go into more detail at the end of the presentation, but there'll be a further webinar held on the 16th of May, Audiology 101, I think it could be called, maybe something slightly different, but that will go into more detail for how to accurately submit an ACC 45 and an ACC 612, the audiometric report. We can also share some exemplars in our post-webinar package for your reference. But we also need your help with regards to resetting the client expectations moving forward, as not all claims will now be sent through for an ENT assessment. And finally, our cover assessment team have also asked that I make you aware of a couple situations that have been occurring recently. So this is around previously declined occupational noise-induced hearing loss claims. So there's two components to this. If you've had a client who's had a previously declined claim, but has had further noise exposure, occupational noise exposure, then a new ACC 45 claim needs to be lodged as well as a new ACC 612. You cannot send just an ACC 612 on an already declined claim. This will be declined again, even if it's over the 5% threshold. The flip side to this is if you've had a patient who has had a previously declined claim and no further occupational noise exposure, please inform the patient or the client that this will be declined as nothing has changed from the occupational noise exposure aspect. I do acknowledge that elderly patients may forget, but important to note that this will also help reduce duplication of claims and allow for a more efficient journey for our patients. So in summary, I'd like to thank you all again for your commitment and support throughout this journey. And also the engagement we've had during the second stage from NZAS, as well as Ben and Brad from AudioAccess, has been greatly appreciated. So that's from me. I'll hand back to Cody for if we have any questions.
Awesome work. Thanks, Barb. I'll just get our question moderators, Ben and Mel, to come online and let us know if there's any questions or general themes that have come through.
I've been pretty quiet on the question front, which was surprising because I was expecting a couple. So if you've got any, feel free to message me.
Sorry, I have got one question.
Okay.
Yes, sorry. After being declined, how many years of further occupational noise exposure after a client can apply again?
Depends on their full work history. So yeah, that's a bit hard to give you an exact number, but if there has been any further exposure, then my suggestion is that a new claim needs to be lodged.
Thank you.
It's Chatu here. I have another question, please. If they have had a previous decline, but they have forgotten that, or it's been declined because they haven't completed the paperwork, and we lodge a new ACC 45 where they don't have any further work history, but we've done all the work and we've done a new audiogram. Is ACC still going to pay us the 612 fee, which is 185, or no? Are they going to decline that?
I can come back to you on that one, but my my initial thoughts with regards to that, if you won't be penalised if the client has forgotten that they've had previous claims declined. You know, we're only human, we can't remember everything. So I would, if you've asked the question and they've said that there's they've had no previous claims decline, then I would continue to proceed.
Thank you.
Oh, I've just
about sending the actual paperwork to ACC. So I send it via email all the time after seeing the client within the day or the next day. It includes the ACC 612, 724, NAL, previous records, as well as their audiogram. However, I'm still actually like getting some emails from other case officers or managers that they still need the ACC 724 and 612. However, they've actually received some of the paperwork that I've attached in that email, but they're still looking for those specific ones. Is there a particular like title of the document that they're looking for so that they know that that's the ACC 612 and 724?
That's a great question. Sorry, I missed your name there. We will ask our inbound docs team, and we can reply in an email following the completion of the webinar.
Thanks for your questions, team. What I might do is just get you to type them in the chat to the two that have questions here and questions, just so that we can move on. But we will come back to your questions later on.
Thanks, Cody.
Thank you. Thanks, Barb. I'll hand to Ben from AudioAccess and let you go through your presentation. Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, team. And it's exciting to see so many of us join today. 250 of us are engaged on the topic of ACC. That's always nice. And it's been great working with Barb and Cody with the idea of improving the journey for clients. And it's exactly what we do every day. So it's exciting to see the work that's happened over the past year. Next slide, please. Yep. So look, I've mentioned my name's Ben DeFarius. I'm an audiologist with a special interest, particularly in digital health and enablement. This is how I find myself here. Alongside working on the PLH calculator most of you use today, I also represent NZAS on the ISO standard committee with a particular focus around audiology, but in particular noise-induced hearing loss. The benefit of that obviously is that I get exposure to some of the world-leading discussions on the topic, but also the population data that we get. A lot of that population data drives what we use in the calculator. So it's used to help determine who's at risk of occupational noise damage, noise prevention strategies, but in this particular case, medico-legal calculators that help tease apart age and noise and other things as well. So I've had a main goal of trying to improve the way we calculate noise-induced hearing loss, so there's more clarity for our clients and our clinicians, but I knew I couldn't do it alone. So we pulled alongside another audiologist called Brad Rose, a developer, Brandon Thomas, and a creative, Christy Wright. We've worked together now for the past year or so, and it's been great to actually add this piece in with the new triage process. So we've had the goal of just creating digital solutions that improve hearing services in New Zealand, and while that's definitely ambitious, we are excited to launch what I believe to be the first clinic decision support tool in the New Zealand hearing sector. So that's exciting for us. So I want to introduce to you guys the Notch report. So we'll go on to the next slide, please. Yeah, so before you all yell at me and say, look, just show me the tool being ready, I want to explain the reasons why. It probably helps a lot. Why you should be using a new tool, why you should be sending it. And again, on the ACC 612, it states send this document or a PLH calculation or the NOW calculator with the 612. And this is a reminder today that that should begin, or it should be happening. So if you're not already, that's another thing to add already, but I hope to detail why you should use this tool, the Notch report, and why any current solutions shouldn't be used from today. So this tool was actually developed from the ground up. Incorporates the calculations that ACC want to see and have set out important in that new triage process that Barb's just talked about. And it's the only version to do so. And saying that, there will be a new Excel calculator inside the members area on the NZAS website, so you can feel free to access that alongside our tool. So you'll see some links attached soon, but this dovetails well into my next point. So on that Excel calculator, there is some challenges with any updates, improvements, and we've had feedback on that, but the Notch report will actually reflect any changes, improvements. If ACC decide to change something tomorrow or 6 months time, or ISO standards change, you'll see that adapted overnight. You don't have to do anything. And I think that's really important. We've had feedback throughout that people just don't understand what changes have happened and what they mean. They're using the wrong Excel versions, and in some cases, they just don't have the right Microsoft version to run the calculator. So this is really important for us as well, because as a workforce, we're not always in clinic. We might be part-time. We might not always get access to a webinar like this or have the time to learn those things, but we might not be in New Zealand all the time. We might be overseas for an OE, but we also might be changing employers. So we just wanted to make something consistent across whether or not you're a small independent or you're a big company. This is a tool that's available for you guys to use. It's scarier now, though, I should add that, because the older versions that I created and are around won't reflect the new calculations that ACC are asking for. And that could reflect poorly on any claims we made. And Barb talked about the fact that any uncertainty will go to an ENT. That's the risk we play with sending something that isn't up to date, it isn't the latest version. So we understand with the new role that audiologists play with ACC is actually really exciting for us. We're playing a bigger role now, but that brings challenges with time, documents, responsibility. I know that as a clinician, we've got the same time, but increased responsibility with the 724 and the ACC 45. I've always wanted to introduce a tool that helps to streamline that process for clinicians, and ultimately that gives clients the better hearing results faster. So next slide, please. And I think this will jump straight into the demonstration, Caitlin. Why we want to move to an online web tool and why I'm excited about it, but also the reasons why the Excel spreadsheet isn't fit for purpose anymore. Let's take a deep dive into a demonstration using the tool and a bit on the website to start with. So with the AudioAccess website, this will be the page you open up into. I strongly recommend you favorite this or keep it somewhere close, and I'll provide the links. So when you are working throughout the day, you can quickly open it and get started with any calculations that you need to. So here down below, you'll just see some reasons why, just to remind people throughout why we're doing this, a quick summary of the Notch report, and where our goals are moving forward. Down the bottom here, really important, if you have the chance to leave some feedback, support, if you want to get involved or you want to know any more, please leave this, and I'll talk about this later, but that's really going to help us moving forward. But this is also where we'll add any information on new news coming out, any updates that we're going to be doing, and what you need to be aware of using the tool. So keep an eye on this page as well, but let's get started in the app. So opening the app, you'll see 4 main sections. You've got patient details at the the top or the start, you've got injury information, hearing data, and eligibility results, and the report actually gets generated from that page as well. At the bottom, you'll see a disclaimer that continues throughout. No patient information is getting stored using this tool, and that's important to know and feel safe and secure thinking that. So starting first, let's add the client in. So I'm going to call them that. I'm going to enter the birth date details. You can see here, you can use the date of birth calculator here if you like, and you can go through and go back, but I prefer to type mine out. These gender details is really important because that's going to be the age, sex factors that apply to the calculations at the end. You can use the male values, the female values, or the other category. Just keep in mind the other category will actually use the male values because other age factors do not exist in the ISO standard at this stage. But pick the best one that you think applies, but I want you to be aware what's actually happening in the background. As I started working through there, you might have noticed that I've actually started generating the patient information at the top left. This is just to help identify what information you're applying to what patient. And if you click the start over, it'll wipe it and run you back to the start. So if you're doing multiples in the day, this is really useful for you. So let's move next. Occupation information, very new for us, and it was really important, as you can see from Barb's conversation earlier. Occupation is one of the most important things we should be thinking about when we're talking about triaging a client and whether or not they're a candidate. In the past, we've had nothing. We've had the noise tables, but very seldom used. So we really wanted to make this a big focus moving forward, and this is just a starting point. This is going to be one of our big areas of updates and improvement in the future. So in this area here, you just want to enter the occupations you want to be considered at risk of noise damage. So you talk about people that are 85 dB on an 8-hour basis, but also people that are involved or have been exposed to impulse sounds above that throughout the day of any level, because you can never be sure what will happen there. So when you're talking about an occupation, I'm going to click myself as a builder, and I'm going to say that I started it when I was 10 years old, which is pretty crazy, but for this scenario, I'll just enter it in. I'll also say that I decided I wanted to be an electrician after 20 years and diversify. And you can see here, at this stage, you may not know what's actually a significant occupation, but just know that we'll be doing some work behind the scene to help with this information. But also you need to think about, if you wanted to understand why 10, 20, 30 years is significant when you want to look at occupational noise damage, I'll pop up some graphs on the screen here where you can see the average noise-induced hearing loss to expect when you're 10, 20, 30 years in, and based on the noise levels. And you can see here, it certainly gets significant as you exceed the 85, but certainly as you exceed 10 years, and that's why it's important. So this screen here, hearing data. This is the area that you guys will be used to the most. You can use the data test, and you can actually go back a couple of months or years or whatever you want. You can pick any data test you like, and that will ultimately impact the age factor used for the client. So it'll use, essentially it will pretend that that person was that age of the test, which is fantastic, and feel free to use that, but in this case I'm going to use today's date. Using the tab button will actually rotate through this downwards as you typically would with an audiogram, so that there's a nice addition for your quick access and ease of use. In this case here, I'm going to make the threshold slightly different just so you can see the difference. You've also got bone conduction. So while this won't change the calculations behind the scenes in terms of the numbers, the percentages, all those things, it's really important information the cover assessor would need to determine if they're worth triaging onto an ENT or able to make a decision today. So when you're talking about bone conduction, is it a conductive loss? Is it chronic? Is it impacting the candidacy of the client? It's on our audiograms, and we've already entered it anyway, so it shouldn't be too hard to add for you guys, and it just reflects really well on us. So I'll enter the thresholds here right now. And what you'll see now is it actually generates an audiogram at the bottom here and actually transcribes all that information in as you typically would an audiogram. So that looks great. Obviously it's missing 250, but this is the view that the cover assessors would prefer to see. At the top here, you've got the total loss, age factor and age corrected adjusted. That's in the order that the ACC 612 is in. So you should be able to copy and paste that or transcribe that straight to your 612. So that's great. Also here at the bottom, it's got the where are you above 5% or below 5%? If you're above, continue with the application, that's great. If it's below, do not continue, stop now. However, when you are above 5%, that doesn't necessarily mean to go for it. There are other reasons why you'd consider it, and we can talk about that later in May in the webinar. But also we'll probably touch on it from our tool perspective and some useful tips and guides in the future as well. But just a quick touch, this notch and bulge table that we've introduced is a really nice feature to have. So when you're talking about notch, you're talking about, is there a dip in those high frequency noise-induced hearing loss thresholds, and does it rise? That's again what you're expecting to see in the early stage of noise-induced hearing loss. However, in the later stages, or even at the start, you get a bulge. So a bulge is when the noise-induced hearing loss threshold, so from 3 to 6, actually differ from the age expectation. So when you do have both of those things, that's a really strong case. When you have none of them, it's a good indicator that this client should not or likely won't get accepted for noise-induced hearing loss cover. So when you are looking at notch, you tend to get it early on, and as we age, it disappears because the 8 kilohertz does drop with age-related hearing loss, but bulge should continue throughout. When you're looking at this, and I talk about the difference between age, this black line here represents the average person at that age. So in this case, we would expect his threshold that I've just entered the details for to be at this level here. So you can see any difference between these two, it should be related to something else. It's not necessarily always noise. It can be genetic, it could be conductive, it could be other factors, it could be recreational noise as well. But this is a really useful tool to use, and that's how the bulge calculation works. So now that's the audiogram transcribed there, that's great. And again, you've got the notch and bulge table to help you identify whether or not this candidate is a good case. But let's generate the report, the most important piece. So here's the report here, and you can see here you've got a big display here which you'd want to save, send away, and you definitely want to include with your 612. This is important, and this has been dropped in the past, so another reminder, please make sure you include this. So now that's the audiogram transcribed there, that's great. And again, you've got the notch and bulge table to help you identify whether or not this candidate is a good case. But let's generate the report, the most important piece. So here's the report here, and you can see here you've got a big display here which you'd want to save, send away, and you definitely want to include with your 612. This is important, and this has been dropped in the past, so another reminder, please make sure you include this along with your 612, and the cover assessors are expecting to see them. So you've got here at the top the client details and the age. Okay, so the age is the date of the test again, that's what the asterisk is about, so just keep that in mind. If you're using an old date, that's going to be reflective of their age at the date of the test, not the age they are actually now. Occupation here, this is the little snapshot, so the cover assessors can quickly look at this as a builder or an electrician. I know they've got the 724 available to use, but this is another really good snapshot of the reason why you've applied and the reason why you think this candidate is a strong case. Here is the audiogram added in as well, and you've got the total losses, which I talked about before. Something new is the occupational noise-induced hearing loss tables here at the bottom. So these are adjusted to reflect the new values ACC have asked for, but also includes the age, loss, sex factor as before. So you can see when we talked before, anything below 4% is not a great candidate and shouldn't be applied, but anything above 4% can be, and it's likely going to go to an ENT if it's 4 to 6%. So that's great to know. But just keep in mind that is a useful conversation piece to have, and also lets you know whether or not it's worth sending this client through the process. So, and again, you've got the bottom here, but again, this is only going to apply to the total. So even if they're above 5% threshold, and if this is below 4%, that is going to suggest that you don't go forward with the application. So this is one scenario, but what if we made them slightly older? So if I go back here and adjust through, and I'll actually make myself 20 years older, what will happen to the report now? So it says under 5% threshold based on the information provided, do not continue. And if I click through here, you'll now see the occupational noise-induced hearing loss minus the age, sex, loss factor is now 2.9. So all in all together, not a strong candidate to apply through. So this concludes the demonstration today, and again, you might have some questions in the comment box today, but feel free to send any questions later on through to us, but I hope you've enjoyed this demonstration. Thank you. Awesome. So thanks for taking the time to watch it, and in some parts watch it twice. So thanks everybody for that. But I just wanted to finish on some key points. I know you'd be sick of hearing my voice, but the Notch report is available today, available free for all, access from the same places as has been for the old tool, so on the members area and NZAS website, but also using that link that you can see attached here. And I'll provide some links hopefully later on as well, maybe in the comments box if I'm lucky. It's always going to follow best practice, the most up-to-date research and whatever ACC recommends. It stores no data. And again, expect to see some guides, some resources, and touching on a couple of those points later, particularly around some of the new features we're bringing out. Why is it important and how do you use it? And lastly, I'd just love to say any feedback or support is going to be welcomed. We're audiologists trying to make tools for audiology, and this is one big step for us. So thank you. Any questions?
Oh, we have a few, Ben.
Ooh, good.
So I'm going to start with this one because you kind of touched on it already, and that's come through. And you said that no data is stored, and there is some desire to know how was the data processed into a report without it being retained in any way?
Yeah, so it just pulls it through onto the PDF, and that's all it does. So if you change those records or if you change anything else, it's just creating an image of what you've generated in the calculator, but there's nothing behind the scenes. There's no database or anything like that. So hopefully that answers that question.
That's cool. And will an offline tool be made available also for when a website is down or internet connectivity is not available?
You do have the calculator on the NZAS website. Just know at times that will need to be updated. To continue to stay up to date. It is at this stage, so just make sure you're using the NZAS PLH version that comes out today. I think it'll be the 0323 version. Anything before that, do not use.
Yeah, great. So we've had a couple of questions come through, and I think it's kind of similar and along the same line, which is, does the Notch report replace the PLH, or is this in addition to it?
So it replaces everything in use. So I know I've made it confusing by naming things 3 times. So I think it's been called the NOW calculator, the PLH calculator, now to be the Notch report. They are all the same thought process. They're just calculator tools. This one is different in terms of it incorporates everything from the CLB, LCB. If that makes any sense to you, it's another calculator that was used and incorporates everything from the PLH calculator that was useful, along with other features and tools to reflect what ACC have wanted. So there's no reason why you would need to use anything else but this.
Cool. NZAS can confirm that they will keep the current PHL calculator updated on the website. So that's great news. Thank you so much for that, Karen. Now, I'm not sure if this question is related to you. I think it is, because I think I saw it at the start. And is this based on ISO 1999 data? And is the age graph from ISO 1999?
So the noise calculations are, but not the age. The age reflects 2017, which is the latest versions, but the age factors behind the scene are still the 1999 ones because they haven't been agreed in. So in 6 months' time, that might be another conversation we have and another update we need to fulfill, but at this stage, we're using the ones that are in regulation.
Okay, cool, thank you. What value do you input if there is no response at the limit of the audio meter?
That's a great question, and I actually missed that. So I always just put the value at the end of the audiometer, so the maximum value that you tested at. So that'd be traditionally 95 on some machines in the highs and 110 in some other places. So those values are better. Do not put 0 or blanks, because typically what PLH calculators do is think that it's normal. So you'll see it reflected in the audiogram though, because what will happen is it will spike up and down and go all over the place. Yeah. Good question.
Great. Thank you. Is there any way that the audiogram data can be imported from NOAA? I'm hoping you know what NOAA is.
Yeah, well, we all do.
Okay, good. So it's just me then.
So not at this stage, but that's something that does excite me, would be something to make it easier and of use. But at this stage, it really is just a basic version to improve on what we've had before. But certainly we're going to be looking to develop it further to make it as easy as possible for you guys. Just at this stage, no NOAA integration.
Okay, great, thank you. I'm going to ask you 2 more questions, and then I've got a theme of questions that have been coming through from Barb, so hopefully that would be okay. There is questions are still flooding in, by the way, but I know I'm just conscious of time. So, and I think this one might be a bit for you, Barb, as well. And is this tool required for an ACC claim, or is it an option? There are audiologists out there that are feeling a bit overwhelmed with all the paperwork. They've got the ACC 45, the 612, there's a 724 to coordinate, and now we've got to do this tool as well. So what is the value of this tool, and why would an audiologist prioritise the use of this tool, and is it compulsory?
I can definitely confirm it's not compulsory.
Thank you.
Yes, so no, it's not compulsory to be able to submit the lodge the claim and the 612. It's there to make it easier for audiologists.
Is it to make it easier for the cover assessors as well, or just the audiologist at this point?
It helps the whole journey, the whole process.
Yep. Okay, so the completion of like the 612. Okay, great. Thank you. I hope that answers your question in terms of whether or not it's thing. Now, we've had a few questions already going, oh my goodness, where is this on the NZAS website? I want it now. I want this demo video. So can you tell us when it's going on the NZAS website and how our wonderful audiologists can access it? Because clearly they want to start using that today.
So it's actually probably been ready for the past couple of days. We've been holding off on it, but it will be available. I was having conversations with Helen and Karen that it will be available there today. And we will want to share the link to this webinar as well. And we might even just share the demonstration version of this as well, just if you wanted to watch the short, although it's not that short, 10 minutes of the tool and walking through. And again, just expect some more information on anything if you need to. But hope that answers your question, but please go ahead and use from today.
Yeah, what I'm hearing through quite a few people is, where is it? I want it. So that's great. So thank you so much. I'm going to stop the Ben questions there, but there is one other theme of questions that have been coming through. And Barb, you've already kind of touched on this a bit, but it's around that 10 years. So we've had questions along the lines of, okay, so my client has been, or my patient has been in and out of those noise those noise occupations, over the course of say 15 years, they're coming in and out and in and out. Will they be okay? Will they be declined? I've got someone who's in their 30s and had 8 years of hearing loss exposure. Will they be declined? Does this include any overseas exposure? If my patient's been in a factory for 6 years, then they don't have any other occupational noise exposure, so will they be automatically declined? So there seems to be a bit of concern and noise around this one. So I'm just wondering if you can really kind of speak to this a little bit more.
Yeah, 100%. Thanks, Mel. So with regards to the claim, we don't just look at work history. That's one factor. So we look at the client as a whole, basically. So it doesn't have to be 10 continuous years. It can be across, multiple years. We're looking at kind of the type of occupation. And we know that, as Ben showed in his video as well, in terms of the longer that someone's in a occupation where they have more exposure, and there's different types of exposure. There's that kind of continuous exposure, and then there's that kind of intermittent exposure that is also quite significant. So I'm not going to say 10 years definitely a decline or whatnot. We look at the client as a whole and make a determination from there, because there could be other factors at play that could be the risk factors. So as I mentioned a few times, that when it comes through to the cover assessors, if they have any uncertainty around the work history, it's a referral through to the ENT to use their expertise in that space. So.
Great, thank you. Now there's 2 more people that have just come through. Please, can you ask this question of Barb? So Barb, you're the woman of the moment. Do we need to use this tool when they're doing re-aid applications? I wasn't sure about the answer to this one. We may have to take this one away.
No, so again, it's not compulsory. If it helps you in that process, then our cover assessors obviously are aware that this is going live today. So if it helps, then absolutely. In terms of the triage criteria, it's currently just for new claims that are being lodged, and there's work continuing to be done in that space with the cover assessment team in terms of how else the triage criteria can be used in other areas like the re-aiding. So it's not compulsory, but as like always, the more information, the accurate information we have, the better for helping to make that decision.
Yeah, and they were wanting to know if they use. Oh, sorry, Ben, where you go?
I'll just add to that point. You're going to need to do the 612 in order to re-aid. and you're going to need to know the PLH values today of that client. So you are going to have to use this tool. You may as well generate the report and send it. But again, you've heard from Barb, they may not be as important receiving it than before, but you are going to need to enter those values in the 612.
Yes, yeah. Thank you.
And the one final one is just around trauma claims and how they work. So now the trauma claims weren't something that we worked on, did we, Barb? And they wanted to know whether or not, what was the process for lodging a trauma claim for an audiologist. Now, this wasn't something that we touched from memory. Do you know anything about that? Or yeah, we will have to come back to you with some more information on this one.
So that was out of scope. We were just focusing on the occupational noise induced hearing loss component. Trauma was out of scope. However, Cody might be able to speak to that in the next webinar.
Great.
Definitely.
Okay, cool. Great, thank you. Noted by Cody already. And Jenny, in answer to your question, can you please confirm again, if we use this new tool, does this mean that we do not need to send or do the old PLH Excel sheet? The answer is yes, that is correct. Cool.
That's
right.
Awesome.
There are plenty of other questions. We will get back to you, I promise. It will be in a follow-up, but thank you so much for your engagement in the questions. They are obviously exactly what is needed. So Cody, I'm going to hand over to you to close us off. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mel. And thanks, Ben and Barb, for presenting today and all of your work on this. Obviously, there's quite a bit of interest with how many people have turned up today and also all the questions. We understand we've covered off quite a bit of information here today. Some of you will probably need some time to review everything before you're ready to kind of come back to us. So as a reminder, these sessions are recorded, and a copy of the recording and slides along with the responses to all questions raised will be shared with everyone that has registered. This will most likely be going out as well via NZAS, so I'll get Helen and Karen to send the links, etc., out to their members. And if you've got any further questions, we're always happy to hear them, or you want to provide some more feedback following this webinar, please get in touch with us by emailing. It's on this slide, I think. The email address is actually wrong, so it's audiologyadvisor@acc.co.nz. So I will pop that out in our communications after the webinar. Apologies for that. I would also just like to thank everyone for your time today, allowing us the chance to talk you through these exciting changes. I know it's a bit of time out of your day, but we do appreciate the fact that you've all turned up today. We will be sending out an invitation in the near future for anyone interested in the Audiology 101 webinar. So that's to be held in May. We've got a confirmed date of May the 16th, and that will be more along the lines of how to lodge a claim, the 612 and the other forms and the exemplars that Barb's mentioned today, and a few other things around processes internally. So it'll be a bit more of a cover basics, processes, lodgement session rather than anything specific, but I think it's always a good refresher for older audiologists or people that have been in the business for a while, or our newer audiologists that are just starting out. So really encourage your attendance at that one as well, and you'll get a bit more information shortly. So I'll close us off now with ACC's karakia. Anybody, you're all welcome to join. So whaia, whaia, whaia te tika, whaia te pono, whaia te aroha. Mo te oranga tangata, kia puta ki te whaiau, ki te ao marama, haumie, huie, tae kie. Thank you all.